Australian tour. And this week, we feature her in the midweek special.
I don't think I've changed at all as a person. I've got the same friends and, I argue about the same things and I laugh about the same things as I ever did.
Sade.
I throw the same things around the flat that I ever did.
Sade talks about her success, her appearance at Live Aid, the second album, and more. Sade, the midweek special at 9 Wednesday night.
Helen Ola Sade Adu, known to the world as Sade, has had an extraordinary and sometimes difficult existence, but at least she has never, ever been bored.
I've had a fairly colourful background, I suppose, but I don't think anything tough necessarily is bad for you. I think that it actually strengthens you, and I'd rather have had a colourful background than a dull one, so I think it's sort of paid off my background in a way.
The daughter of an English nursing assistant and an African professor, Sade was born 26 years ago in a village near the Nigerian capital of Lagos, a village that is still home to her father's family.
I lived there until I was 4, and then came over with my mother and my brother, because my mother left my father, and she came over with just the two of us in a suitcase into a really freezing cold winter here. And I've been here ever since. I've grown up in England.
Growing up in England, in a dreary little East Coast community called Holland-on-Sea, isn't all that easy. At least not for a racially mixed family with no money and no prospects.
I'm going to say this for the tabloids, the Sunday tabloids, the story of my life. Well, I don't know. My parents had a lot of problems together, and there was a lot of toing and froing. And my father toed and froed a little to try and get my brother and I back to Nigeria. And then my mother, a few years on, remarried somebody, a mad butcher, and it was a disastrous marriage. And of course, the rest of the family were involved with it, obviously, because they had to be part of it. But it was colourful.
Although her mother appears to be a woman who is loved well, but not too wisely, Sade feels that she did the best she could under the circumstances.
My mother's always been very supportive, although she's maybe made some mistakes. She's not very good at choosing her men, if you like, and she's made a lot of mistakes, but she's always, we've always been number one, my brother and I, and she's always sort of cared for us, and we've not been deprived emotionally in any way, so I don't think I've really missed out on anything. So it was never really that terrible. However terrible the situation that Mum might have got us all into, she was always there and she was always supportive. So, it was never terrible, too terrible.
That's Sade, and When Am I Going to Make a Living, the second British single from Diamond Life. Now, Sade learned a lot from those early years in England. She learned not to follow in her mother's footsteps.
I think it's unlikely. I don't know that I'll ever get married. I don't really think I'll ever get married. I don't know if that's as a result of that or because I'm a modern woman.
And she learned to be cautious in her choice of friends and lovers.
You don't consciously learn. I don't think you don't consciously say, right, I am not going to do this, that, or the other. I think you just, I guess you just learn about people and quicker, I suppose, if you've seen things sort of go wrong with relationships.
And most of all, she learned to make the most of every opportunity that came her way.
Not having lived in a house with central heating ever, say, waking up in the morning and getting dressed in bed, is inclined to make you want to have a house one day with a heated towel rail and central heating. Do you know what I mean? I think that is almost inevitable, and I think quite a lot of people strive for the things that they haven't ever had, much more so than sort of somebody who's always had these things and just expects them. But I don't. I mean, money isn't, or that isn't the thing that drives me. I mean, that isn't the thing that motivates me. It's a nice reward if what you really want to do pays you, financially. But that isn't something that drives me necessarily. I don't know. I suppose it's just a desire to be creative that keeps me wanting to do things rather than, trying to sort of make things nicer around me.
Jezebel, a song written by Sade Adu for Promise. Now, Sade writes most of her own material, which is quite an accomplishment for someone who grew up with hardly any music in her life at all.
My mother has never really had a record player or anything. Or we had one, I think, that we used to keep pull outs on top of. It didn't actually work. But, so, I don't know really where my... I suppose it started when I was about 14. I started buying records because I wasn't actually surrounded by music as a child or anything like that. I've got an extremely unmusical background. Really.
After a brief and rather bizarre stint as a mortuary employee, an experience she says that made her a confirmed vegetarian, Sade turned to fashion design and even created her own line of menswear. But then, in 1982, she sort of stumbled into music and decided to stay there.
I'd actually started singing with a band by mistake. A friend who went to the same clubs as I did just said he was managing a band. He wasn't a big entrepreneur or anything. He was just a friend of theirs, basically. They had two backing vocalists, and one of them just walked out without giving any notice. And he said to me, could I sing? Presumably because I'm tinted, people think that you can sing and dance if you're tinted. So, presume that's why he asked, because I don't see any other reason other than maybe the fact that he knows that I like music a lot. And I said, well, I would try, I'd have a go. So I went along and auditioned for this band, and I was initially turned down. And then sort of about 2 weeks later, they came back and said they couldn't find anybody else, would I do it? So I said, yes, why not? That's how I started. I started singing with this group Pride. From within that band, we formed another band, Sade.
Sade, of course, was the band that got a contract. And in the spring of 1984, the first single from Diamond Life was released in the UK. Your Love is King immediately soared to the top of the British charts. That's Your Love is King, the song that introduced Sade to England, and so inspired the critics they proclaimed her the new high priestess of pop.
We didn't sit down and say, right, we must create a person or anything like that. It just sort of came together because, I have a certain way that I look. I suppose I have a certain taste, or just like anybody does. And it doesn't necessarily fit in with current sort of trends. I mean, my hair wasn't like everybody else's. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that I made a conscious effort to be like that. I've just always, it's just the way I am and the way I want to be. And the same applies to music. The music didn't really necessarily fit in. I mean, Your Love is King almost didn't belong in the charts when it came out. It didn't comfortably sit there. But that wasn't in order, are we going to create a sound or do we want to be different? It was just us, doing what we want to do.
Nearly a year after Your Love is King was released in England, Sade made her debut in America with Hang On to Your Love, a top 20 tune from January of 1985.
At night we play the top 8 at 8 on 3CV Music.
Diamond Life was as big a hit in America as it had been in England, even though the critics didn't quite know how to categorize Sade. Was she soul, jazz, or simply, as many reviewers decided, Billie Holiday revisited?
It's certainly nothing like Billie Holiday. And I've said what I've said before is I think it's probably because I wear my hair the way Billie Holiday occasionally wore her hair, with a similar colour, and both female, which, is what people do. They can't see any further than that, and they certainly can't hear. They've all got cotton wool in their ears. But, I happen to think Billie Holiday is, one of the greatest singers, like many people do, one of the greatest singers of all time. And I will love the way she interprets the song and how subtle she is. One thing, I wouldn't try to be like her. And the other thing is, if I was trying to be like her, I'd do a better job than I am doing.
From Diamond Life, here is Smooth Operator, the song that made Sade a star in the States. Recorded live, that's Sade, and Sade talks about living with her band when Special Edition continues. Sade Adu is such a vibrant and commanding presence that it's easy to forget that Sade is a band as well as a woman. A band comprised of bass guitarist Paul Denman, keyboard player Andrew Hale, and saxophone and guitar player Stuart Matthewman, who collaborates with Sade on much of the writing. And the group has become a surrogate family for Sade, who can't imagine a career without them.
Wherever we go, we're okay because we got each other. As corny as that might sound, we do have good fun, good laughs, and it's always, there's nobody, not all of us are ever miserable or fed up at the same time. There's always somebody who boosts up the others, and basically, I think I wouldn't really like to do it, and I probably wouldn't be doing it if I didn't get on with the people who I work with, and we have some pretty hysterical times, and that in itself is that wherever we go, it's like our home because we've got each other to entertain and be entertained by. So I won't sort of feel homesick or lost or anything. I won't sort of think, where am I? I wake up in a hotel room asking myself which city I'm in. It doesn't really matter.
From Promise, that's never as good as the first time. Shortly after the release of Diamond Life, Sade went back to Nigeria to get reacquainted with her father and his family, none of whom were particularly impressed by her newfound fame. But instead of being disappointed by their indifference, she found it somehow very reassuring, a yardstick by which she could keep her success in perspective.
My grandmother, she's coming towards 80 years old, and she's a great, strong, strapping woman who's full of life and energy. But when we went to see her in the village that she lives in, it's like we arrived, and from the time we arrived to the time we left 3 days later, we were sung to constantly and prayed to. And she knows I'm a singer, but how can you say to somebody who sings 24 hours a day, I'm a singer and I get paid, I actually make records and get paid for it? Why should that mean anything to them? And they just sing as a natural course of events, like getting up in the morning. It's just something they do. So quite frankly, I don't see why it should impress her very much. But she recently heard Cherry Pie, and apparently she danced around the room, and she's 80 years old. But my father was, I think, singularly unimpressed, and he was listening to something like, it was Kool and the Gang, in fact. He said, I hope one day you make a record that's as successful as this. And I said, but we have, we've made a record that's #1 in Germany and #1 in all over Europe, and he just didn't listen, basically carried on listening to what he was listening to and carried on driving along. So he's singularly unimpressed.
Well, Sade's father is probably the only person who isn't impressed by his daughter's music, or by her stunning stage appeal, her sultry delivery, her thoughtful and evocative lyrics. He may be indifferent to her talent, but the rest of us are under her spell, and we're looking forward to hearing and seeing a whole lot more of Sade. Hey, thanks for listening.